It's morning here and the snow has just stopped. We've got a couple of inches, but just enough to make it look nice and Christmassy. I hope all of you listening are well, and I thank those of you who write to me largely positively, in fact entirely positively, but I'm sure there are plenty who don't like it as well, but they don't bother to write. But I want to talk about the season anyway, sort of indirectly, starting with some favourite language. And the first one I want to turn to is one that I hope that all of you know by heart anyway. But for me, it's a central passage. Mercy and truth have met together. Righteousness and peace have kissed. Truth shall spring out of the earth, and righteousness shall look down from heaven. Yes, the Lord will give what is good, and our land will yield its increase. Righteousness will go before him, and shall make his footsteps our pathway. There's Psalm 85. I love the conjunction of mercy and peace, which can, of course, only come out of truth and genuine forgiveness, genuine repentance. And it's a problem that our world is not coping with very well, although we will get sentimental over Christmas. But it's interesting to see the Christmas tree displacing the birth in the stable. What's it saying about us? Well, yeah. Christmas for most kids when I was growing up, you'd go out on Christmas morning and kids would be on the street showing off what they'd got for Christmas. It was about things. And I grew up in a religious tradition that took the verse in the epistles about not being bound by times and seasons a little bit too far, in my view, in that they didn't really celebrate Christmas. But they were right in the sense that Christmas has been entirely taken over by the commercial area for most people. But little bits show through. One of the rather unusual and beautiful things about Britain when I was growing up was, particularly in the north of England, there were very good choirs who would put on the Messiah at this time of the year, and they were ordinary working people in many cases, but simply had good voices and loved singing, and it showed in the way they sang. And so the government will be upon his shoulders, and his name shall be Wonderful Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. It would be amazing to many people around the world to find how many working class people in the late 40s, 50s could actually sing that straight off. That's how popular it was. Handel's greatest opera, as one cynic put it. The series of titles that Isaiah gives to the coming Messiah. But a couple of chapters on, that's in chapter 11 of Isaiah, he writes this: the Spirit of the Lord shall rest upon him, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and might, the Spirit of knowledge and the fear of the Lord. Here he's telling us more about the character of Christ and how he is motivated entirely by the Spirit with a capital S. The Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and right, the Spirit of knowledge and the fear of the Lord. Then he moves on in the next verse to say, his delight is in the law of the Lord, not judging by sight or hearing, but with righteousness and equity. Now, the more practical part of what I want to say today is going to get to AI, but I wonder how many of you will already be making connection between those ancient words from Isaiah and AI. What struck me and keeps recurring in my mind and wakes me up at night is that line, his delight is in the fear of the Lord. That is an astonishing statement to the modern world. But of course, it's deeply biblical. It's not just Isaiah. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And the corollary is that if we stop fearing God, wisdom will disappear. And that's exactly what's happening. University students these days, none of them hear the word wisdom in their courses. Now, I shouldn't say none, because there must be some profs who still use the word wisdom. I know there are, but it's a rare word in the university. And if you ask your children coming home from university, did the word wisdom occur in the last term? I'd be interested if the answer is yes, and whether it was a surprise. I will be asking it because I've got a good number of grandchildren in university at the moment. But the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Why do we prefer to do some things even at cost to ourselves? Where does this come from? AI is now struggling with its impact or perceived possible impact on society as a whole. They already know that screens have been an utter and complete disaster. It happens that today Australia's law on not selling iPhones or screens to anyone under the age of 16 comes into effect. The question is, how are they going to enforce this? The law also includes that they should cancel the accounts of those who are under 16. They will find their way around it, of course, because it's an addiction, and addicts find a way to get their fix. But it's going to be interesting to see whether a legal approach to the problem of anxiety, which is what's driving this legislation, will actually make any difference, or whether it will merely force them not only into having an addiction, but lying about it, which is not going to help them. But at least the tech area is being more serious than usual. Now, one of the people I came across in looking at this during the week was a man called Tristan Harris, who I hadn't come across before. I should have done, I think, and I'll be looking at him a bit more, and an organization that he set up that I don't know enough about yet. But I came across him looking up AI, and he did over an hour's interview on one website, and I found him on others as well afterwards. But he was a smart young man in the high-tech area who was working for Google 20 or more years ago, when he became very aware of just how addictive these things were going to be. And he wrote a note, or more than a note, and sent it round the top levels of Google saying, what responsibilities should we have about these new social media mechanisms that we are producing, because they are addictive? He saw that. He was surprised that he got a lot of positive response. Yes, we ought to do something about it. But then he goes on to say, but what can we do about it? There are several sources for social media. If we say no, all that means is that they will move to another supplier. And we're not going to be able to push this through. He could see that coming. And then he was asked, and has been busy ever since, helping people to think about this problem. But what was interesting to me, in over an hour of conversation, which was serious on the whole, even to the point of saying, well, everybody does have these questions about, what am I here for? Where did I come from? Where am I going? The old questions, the ones that I use all the while. plagiarized since, n centuries before Christ. But they didn't go to the obvious next step, which is, why would we do that? Why would we refuse to be involved in a process that we believe to be wrong? Especially as the government is clearly willing to put pressure on us in various ways to make us do what is evil. And they call it good. Well, what is going on? Well, as usual, it's the ordering of the goods. We now have leaders throughout the world who have no metaphysics. I wish there was a better word, but no spiritual understanding of the world. So their ideas of good are not properly worked out. You note when I read that passage from Isaiah, he said that Christ will not judge by the sight of his eyes or by his hearing. The Messiah will not be a reductionist. We judge only by what we can measure now pretty well. Now, of course, our politicians aren't very good at this, and so they allow their own perverted sense of things without any critical assessment. At least reductionism would allow you to make the measurements to show how badly some things are, and that they're doing, of course. The people in the social media area know that by the age of 12, almost every child has seen some pornography. By chance, they would like to say, but of course, the algorithms are pushing it all the while. The economic thrust behind it is big. I was shocked, of course, being naive in so many ways when coming across this phenomenon and talking to kids in their mid-teens and finding that when I asked them what proportion of your guys in this group have watched pornography, all of us, that's going to do things to you. It cannot be thought that things that were unthinkable in the past are now almost condoned by some. There are certainly judges who would let people off for brutal sexual behavior on the grounds that, well, they've been underprivileged. But that is not the causal phenomenon. It's not going to be put better. It's not going to be made better by any material process. The easiest way to illustrate that is absolutely stunning. If you know anybody who is a saint and works with the problem of child abuse in pediatric settings, they are amongst my colleagues, those whom I have incredible respect for. I could not do what they do. But what they will tell you immediately is that child abuse is not confined to the underprivileged. It simply gets more and more vindictive as you get richer. And of course, we show that in various ways. I mean, there's lots of stuff around on YouTube and elsewhere, usually including a comeuppance for somebody who's being incredibly haughty and nasty to people they consider beneath them. But of course, that's who we are. And when the people who control our jobs decide they want something, saying no can often, in fact, probably frequently leads to you losing your job, or at least knowing that you are not going to go any further in this organization. A reductionistic view of the world leads to abuse in all sorts of ways, because we need that prompt behind us, which we had clearly when we were children. Children know when they have done wrong, and they know that there should be some sort of consequence. It shouldn't be brutal, but it should be real, and it should be followed by reconciliation. because as Christians we have reasons to do that. We have all been forgiven, therefore we must forgive. But when we don't talk about this whole level of what it means to be human, the one thing that really distinguishes us from the animals never gets talked about in biology. I mean, there were silly people in the beginning of the last century who tried to think that you could do it by behaviorism, Skinner boxes and the like, putting pigeons in boxes and making them behave by various stimulus, both positive and negative. Interesting that Skinner's daughter sued him later on for bringing her up as though she was a pigeon. No, behaviorism works with children up until about the age of 8. Forget it after that. It doesn't work. They watch us and see that we don't do it, so why should they? Bring a young child up in the way that it should go. It implies that the parents are behaving in the same way, or at least acknowledging that that is the right way to behave. Not because of advantage or disadvantage in your immediate material environment, but because your soul will be at peace if you go that way. That's why I opened with Psalm 85. Truth can only be handled, moral truth, when there's mercy attached to it. And God taught his people all the way through, I'm not like you. I love mercy. I left hanging last week what I need to say about John Stott's book on the cross, and I acknowledge that. I hope that you noticed that it was left hanging and that it may even spur you on to go and think about your need to read that book yourself. You know, God is not cruel. He does what is good. So you have to think deeply about that if you're going to be involved with the world as it actually is, because it's certainly not true in the short term, is it? The biggest group of patients in my life were children who did not get justice at a superficial level in this world. But God is just. He said, vengeance is mine, I will repay. There is going to be a judgment. I grew up with it is given unto man once to die, and after that the judgment. We run our lives in so many ways, and we need those judgments. So we need to understand where they come from. They don't make sense in a Darwinian world. The question is not what is just, the question is what can I get away with that will advantage my genes. It doesn't matter otherwise.